Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of the JMO Podcast. Once again, I'm your producer, Taylor Michaels, and on this episode, we get to hear childhood stories from legendary angler Tony Roach. Now, I can't tell you how enjoyable it was to sit down with Tony and hear all kinds of stories from back in the day and all the things that shaped and molded Tony and made him into the legendary angler that he is today, and all the things that make him tick. We are honored to have him on this week's episode.
The JMO Podcast is sponsored by Long Haul Trucking. Long Haul Trucking is looking for skilled professional CDL drivers to join their team. Long Haul values their drivers and shippers like nobody else. Their employee-owned ESOP structure has them leading the industry in pay and benefits, geared towards long-term success and growth for company drivers and owner-operators. Long Haul is a people-first company, and it shows. They take pride in giving their drivers an opportunity to have a fulfilling career along with a healthy, happy life on the home front. If you're a professional CDL driver, get a hold of Long Haul at 1-800-255-5153 or look them up online at longhaultrucking.com. Long Haul, running on the power of promises kept.
Let's hear your story.
Right on. Hey, I appreciate you having me on. Like most people that love to fish, I'm just passionate about fishing, man. I grew up as a little kid running around the Northwest Sports Show, fishing the trout pond, nagging my dad for a few more bucks so I could get in the trout pond and fish a little more. And just, I was always enamored by all the pros and everybody walking around the show, and just always looked up to those guys, you know, fishing tournaments, whether it was bass anglers or walleye anglers, just people in the industry. And I kind of had a unique perspective, you know, because my dad fished, my Uncle Gary was in the fishing industry, so I was always running around these shows at a really young age. And I knew at a young age that I wanted to be a professional angler. It's just a matter of getting from that point to where I'm at now. And I just feel fortunate. I get to go fishing all the time. I think last year I fished upwards of 300 days. That was my goal. I always did try to be able to fish 300 days a year. And I get to do that. I wake up in the morning, pour a cup of coffee, I get to go fishing. It's just, I'm living the dream. I love it.
Yeah, man, and to have a goal like 300 days, if you do the math, that means that's every day of the week, Monday through Friday, plus the weekends, almost all year.
Yeah.
You know, that's pretty interesting to think. You know, most guys aren't even going to put 100 hours on their boat motor in a year. That would actually probably be a huge amount, you know, for a lot of people that would consider themselves avid anglers. But, you know, talk about your fishing. You're fishing every day. You're guiding tournaments. You know, what are you doing when you're out there?
All of the above. I do lots and lots of guiding, but, you know, as a active promoter and communicator, you know, I work with a lot of different companies on a lot of different product lines, and fortunate enough to be able to, you know, create a lot of new tackle and things in the industry over the past, for sure, last decade here. You know, everything from rod designs to lure designs, and then just going out there actively promoting it and catching fish on it, and yeah, it's a dream, man. I did, you know, and when I get done working, I like to go fishing. So there's certain things that drive me as an angler in particular, and one is I'll get on a certain bite that I can't stop thinking about, and it's always evolving. You know, I like to fish all different species. It could be a panfish bite that I can't stop thinking about. So when I get done guiding, or I get done, fishing or shooting a video or whatever, I want to go back out and focus on this. Or it might be like a topwater smallmouth bite, right? Because you have a short window throughout the calendar year where that topwater bite's really, really strong. So I might get done guiding and just run back out there and fish topwater till dark or something. So, but that's what drives me as an angler, is like figuring out different patterns. Over the last few years, I've really gotten into several different techniques where it kind of overwhelms you, and then you want to do it in other locations. So, like big swim baits, for example. You know, I was catching bass on big swim baits. Well, then I started catching big walleyes on big swim baits, and then it was pike, and then I really increased it, and I was trying to get muskies, and I really got into the swim bait thing, and then it was jerk baits, and then it was something else. But you know, just figuring out you know, the right pattern for that situation to really put a lot of fish in the boat. And I really don't care what species it is. You know, I've been on the river before where the white bass were going nuts, and I was throwing an X-Wrap out there, and you know, we were supposed to be focusing on walleyes, but the white bass were just crazy, and I just had a riot doing it. You kind of get focused in on that particular bite and why they're there, and it's just fun. That's fishing to me. It could be bluegills. Bluegills in the winter, figuring them out. They're just a type of species that moves from, deep water basins back into the weed lines and moving all around and trying to figure them out. And they can be tough biters. And even though I spent, 30 days in a row chasing walleyes, guiding all winter, when I get a day off, I want to go find some bluegills, or it might be perch. Just it's always something that just triggers me and it gets me up in the morning. Or it could be a certain largemouth technique. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I find certain things interesting, and I also, on the same token, if I have a rough day on the water or on the ice, I take it personal, and I think, there's something I could have done different to catch more fish. So then the next day I'm out there either drilling more holes or just running along with my structure scan, trying to figure out, what I could do differently to put more fish in the boat. So it works both ways.
Yeah. I mean, to be a fish head, you just got to be a fish head,
right.
No doubt about it. And that's just, I think that's just one of the most, admirable things about you and your career, and just being a fan of yours in that multi-species aspect. A lot of guys, in this day and age with tournaments the way they are, it can get to be pretty, not one-dimensional in their fishing strategy, but maybe one-dimensional in their species, but to be the all-around guy, is I think that that's just really, really cool about your career for sure. And you can do that because of where you're at. And so maybe it's obvious to some of your fans, but what is your home body of water? Where are you at and that allows you to do this multi-species?
Mainly in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, basically from Mille Lacs north. I grew up in that region. I grew up wanting to really be a walleye fisherman and a walleye tournament angler. So I was fortunate enough. My dad used to take me to walleye tournaments, and I'd fish walleye tournaments when I was 14, 15, 16 years old. I had some really good success at that. I ended up becoming a guide up in Flag Island Resort and Lake of the Woods when I was in college. Did that throughout my college career, but still fished walleye tournaments, and it was heavily walleye focused. But growing up in the region I was a huge bass fisherman. I loved bass fishing. I loved pike fishing. I loved pan fishing. But it was always just walleye focused initially because that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to continue to fish walleye tournaments and do that. But then, I don't know, something just triggered me, and I ended up, I don't know if I just fished walleye so much that, all of a sudden, when I'd get a day off, instead of going walleye fishing, I started doing more bass fishing, and I just really fell in love with certain bass techniques, but in particular, smallmouth. I just wanted to figure out everything about smallmouth fishing I could, and it kind of consumed me for a while, and I was really, really focused on smallmouth, and not that I've totally conquered everything there is to know, but I've gotten over that a little bit. I still love certain times of year where, I can't wait to go smallie fishing, and we've been blessed in where I live in Minnesota, where we've got a lot of great smallmouth fishing. We've got a lot of great largemouth lakes, excellent walleye fishing, and so I think now where I'm at is I'm not like super focused on one specific species, but more on a calendar year. Like, okay, opening fishing comes around, or I'll even back up. Springtime fishing comes around. I like to run over to Green Bay and fish that. And then as soon as Rainy opens up, I'll run up there and fish the river. And then as soon as opener runs around, I love pitching jigs in shallow water, whether it's, jigs and paddle tails or jigs and minnows, whatever. I love that real shallow water jig bite. And then instantly you get into smallie fishing and throwing jerk baits, and they come out of their wintering areas, and they're all over the place. And then it's that springtime crappie bite. So it's more of a calendar year thing for me. So I try to fit these little windows of different bites in according to that calendar year. And, that's kind of where I'm at now, even to the point where, you get later in the summer, and I love running up to Canada. I kind of cut my teeth in guiding, like I said, up at Flag Island Resort. And I love Lake of the Woods, especially the northwest side of Lake of the Woods, like up towards Kenora and that whole region. And So once a year I try to get up there, and what's cool about up there is you can throw jerk baits for walleyes, you can throw jerk baits for smallmouth, you can catch big pike right around the corner. There's muskies everywhere. I mean, it's just a cool spot on the planet to go fishing, and I think kind of just growing up where I did, it gave me an opportunity to fish lots of different species and just kind of fall in love with that. And now, as an adult, I didn't do a lot of saltwater fishing when I was younger. When we went on fishing trips, it was either pre-fishing for a tournament somewhere for walleyes, or we went to Canada. It was in the Midwest. I mean, or even the Dakotas and stuff. But I mean, it was in the Midwest. It wasn't until I was an adult where I started saltwater fishing, and now some of that stuff's really starting to seep into the fishing disease.
Yeah.
I just was down in Florida, and we're catching snook and speckled trout and stuff, and all of a sudden I started thinking, man, I could get a bay boat down here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I envy you for a trip like that. But I see a lot of see you a lot on Mille Lacs, right? Like that's
Yeah.
close to home. Mille Lacs, what a great body of water. Mille Lacs kind of has a stigma to it, and it might put a few people off, fishing it. But yet you're still out there having some of the best days that anybody can have on Mille Lacs. Talk a little bit about that. Why is Mille Lacs kind of a weird place right now, yet it's still so great?
So I guess it was the negative stigma that comes with Mille Lacs over the last 5 years has been the fact that you can't harvest walleyes. I mean, that's just bottom line. It went from, you could keep a state limit with certain slots to, one fish, then to none, other than the winter. And then, of course, this year, early in the spring, they'll let you harvest fish. But what it's created is just an unbelievable fishery of catching lots and lots and lots of big walleyes and walleyes of all sizes, smallmouth bass, obviously. At the same time that you have this going on, everybody in the world's finding out about how great our smallmouth fishing is. And so Mille Lacs is it's always been an awesome place in my heart because I grew up fishing that lake. That's where I fished my first walleye tournament. I would say more than any other lake in the planet, I spend most of my time on Mille Lacs nowadays just because it's a destination for everybody. But it's so diverse. It's unbelievable, just the structure that's out there. And you could fish one area of the lake one day and fish it totally different than if you fished 10 miles down the shoreline, and the bite's completely different down there than it was where you were at yesterday. And it's just got a lot of big fish. It's got monster smallmouth, monster walleyes, monster pike, and, of course, big muskies. And I think the negative thing that you hear a lot about Mille Lacs is that you can't harvest fish. Well, people automatically think in their minds, if you can't harvest them, wow, there must mean you don't fish in the lake. Well, that couldn't be more further from the truth. The fishery itself is plumb full of walleyes right now, and it's great. I think we're at a great situation. I don't have to harvest a bunch of fish to equate my success for the day, if you will. I don't have to go out and have a live well full of fish to say I had a good time on the water. I think in the past, that, and maybe for some people that's how they weigh their fishing trip, about how many fish they put in the well. But for me, it's never really been like that. I grew up on a lake. I grew up around 1 million lakes. I fish every day. Yes, I like harvesting a few fish. I think it's great to have a fish fry with friends and family. I grew up, we used to get together every Sunday with my family, and we'd have a fish fry. That was our tradition. My dad's friends would come over. My dad was there. My parents, obviously our friends would come over. My grandparents, we'd go to my grandpa's house and have a fish fry. It was always, kind of a Sunday tradition for us. But it was never all about going out and harvesting a bunch of fish. We just fished all the time. So it was like, let's keep a couple perch today, or let's keep a few bluegills and a few crappies. We're going to have a little fish fry tonight. It was never, okay, we're going to fill our live well with perch, and then it's going to be walleyes. And then, it was always just, let's go fishing and whale on them. We always just want to catch up as many as we can, and that's what's cool about Mille Lacs right now. It's like going to Canada. Mille Lacs, the way it is today, wasn't like when I was a kid. It was certainly a great fishery when I was a kid, and I had unbelievable days out there where we absolutely whaled on them. But now, like today, the way it sits today and the status it is right now, it's unbelievable. It truly is. I get done at the end of the day and you get spoiled. You go somewhere else and, it's kind of subpar because you can't whale on, trophy-size smallmouth and trophy-size walleyes and trophy-size pike. And it's just really hard to leave Mille Lacs, especially like May and June, for example. I mean, it's so electric out there. It's just last year we had that late ice out period last year, and I spent a ton of time just driving around with my GoPro because I was just enamored by the thousands of walleyes in the shallows, and I was like, I got to showcase this to people. I mean, people aren't going to believe me, So I actually went in my pole shed and I got a thing for like changing light bulbs out. It's the longest stick I could. It was one of those telescoping light bulb changers, and I extended it out, and then I wrapped another stick on that because, walleyes are pretty spooky in the shallows, and I wanted to get it out as far as I could, and I just drove around with the GoPro, and I drove around at high speed for hours just watching fish. I wasn't even wetting a line. It was just so cool to see that many fish in the shallows. I've always been a fan of viewing fish. When I was a kid, I'd snorkel all over my parents' lake. We'd go to our cabin. Anytime I had an opportunity to snorkel, I'd learn so much about what's going on underwater. I mean, even to the point where like a storm blowing in on my parents, we'd always catch the walleyes when the wind would blow in. I would wonder why are the walleyes in here when it's windy? So it's storming. I'd put my snorkel on and I'd jump in the water and check out why they're there. So I've always been like interested in that and always wondered about that stuff. Well, Mille Lacs, you could see it. It was gin clear. So, I mean, it's just crystal clear. And so I drove around with the GoPro, and I really just drove around drooling over fish, for hours. And but I also learn a lot. I think as an angler, you learn a lot just by taking a step back and viewing. That's why I like underwater cameras in the winter. It's, I've done a lot of ice fishing seminars where I say, I become a better angler because of an underwater camera. And just watching how fish react to different presentations, how they react underneath the ice. It's no different than that spring experience I had. I drove around for 2-3 hours. I marked huge boulders that I didn't know existed, or little cuts inside the reef that, you watch how the walleyes kind of line up in these little depression areas among the reefs, and you just learn a lot by viewing. And, I have as much fun doing some of that stuff as I do actually fishing and trying to get them to bite.
Yeah. I just love hearing that because, when it comes down to these, being a fish head and hearing these stories, there's so much common thread with the guys that, names that they're the kids that instead of staying in the house and, playing Monopoly, were out snorkeling on when the wind was busting in and there was probably a chance of lightning and your parents were wondering where you were, but you were out learning about the walleyes and I just think that is absolutely great. But, so probably at a very young age, you realized you were in a fishing family. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so my whole family fished and we hunt, and it was really. I guess I didn't ever look at it any differently because I didn't grow up with other people's families. We just always fished. And my dad always encouraged it. He always took me fishing. He always kind of encouraged that. I remember coming home at 9 o'clock at night or whatever. My mom was freaking out because I hadn't been home all day, didn't call, didn't do anything, and she was really mad at me, like gonna ground me or whatever. And my dad came home and he's like, "Where were you all day?" And I was like, "Oh, me and Mike were up and down the river. We found some really cool little pools in the river." I lived on a lake river system, and we found these pool areas where the water had dropped in August, and these fish were just loaded in these pools. We walked miles down this river. Well, it takes a long time to get back, and I told him the whole story, and he's like, "You're not in trouble. Like, I'll talk to your mom for you, But I guess the cool part, with my Uncle Gary being, who he was and Mr. Walleye, I idolize that stuff. Like most kids that are into fishing, back then before YouTube, I watched fishing shows all the time. So it wasn't just watching Gary, it was watching Al Linder and Ron and everybody at In Fish, but then it was watching, the Bassmaster Classic and then Roland Martin and, just everybody. I watched as much fishing TV as I possibly could. it's hard to tell my kids now, like, we didn't have DVR. Saturday, just watching TV. And then as soon as I was out the door, trying those different techniques. And like I said here, just running around the sports show. It was cool because I got to meet all these guys that I idolized. I got to talk to Al Linder. I got to talk to Gary. I got to help Gary set up his seminars. And so, yeah, I always was able to use, like, really good equipment, great rods and reels. I had all the tackle I ever wanted in the world. There was never a shortage of tackle at our house. My dad fished on the Mr. Walleye team, so we worked with companies like Berkeley, and so my dad just kind of fueled that with me. He always, I did play sports and stuff, but when I wasn't doing that stuff, I was fishing, and I was just totally into it. I used to drive my boat from our house to baseball practice. I remember I skipped baseball practice one day because we were whaling on the walleyes. We had a big rain and the river was flowing and the walleyes were all over, and we decided not to go to baseball, me and my buddy. Same thing, the coach called the house. We didn't go to practice. We're not going to play in the game. My dad never said a word. He asked why we didn't go to baseball, and I said, well, the fish were biting. And
Perfect.
I never got in trouble. We didn't play that game. My coach made us run for I don't know how many laps around the field the next day, but I never really got in trouble for that. And it was just, and my dad just always kind of fueled that passion, even to the point where, like I said, he always took me. I fished walleye tournaments when my friends were, like you said, playing Monopoly or playing Nintendo or whatever. I was out pre-fishing for a walleye tournament, or when I went up to Lake of the Woods, my dad loaded me up with rods. We got all my gear ready. He loaded me up, and he said, "Man, you're on your way." And he just always fueled that passion, and I see it today now with a lot of these youth angling programs, these student anglers, and I see these kids, how passionate they are, and it reminds me of me, I walking around and just getting to talk to all these other anglers out there, and it's super cool to see. I think we're in such an awesome time period where all these kids, can you imagine, like, when you and I were in high school, if we had a high school fishing team
I
and
can't.
a trap team, like,
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have done with my life. I mean,
Yeah.
I really had. I remember telling people I was going to be a professional angler, and they're like, "You can't make any money at that. There's no way you're going to do that." It was always no. You can't do that. You got to get a real job, kid. Fishing's not gonna. Fishing's for a fun time. You need to go to work or you need to go to college, and I went to college, but then I was guiding on the time, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to go fishing. And now with these student angler programs, and they have this pathway where, you could become a professional angler, or you can win some money here, or scholarships towards school. I mean, it's so cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I was going to ask you about that. Even though you probably grew up fishing with some of the best equipment of the time, does it even compare to the stuff that the average kid is running with now? The technology is just incredible, and like you said, what a great time to be coming up in fishing or raising kids, with fishing tradition and things like that. And I don't have any kids of my own. You do. Talk a little bit about that. You've been through it. You were raised in it. You have kids of your own. What are these kids experiencing now that hopefully they can appreciate?
YouTube, man. If I had YouTube when I was a kid, I would have been like geeking out over this stuff. I used to watch like VCR tapes and DVDs of fishing shows that were like closed loop promotional tapes from like Northland Tackle or Berkeley. I was such a fishing dork. I would just sit and watch that stuff. YouTube videos I sit and watch tons of YouTube videos. That's why I started, producing a lot of different YouTube videos, because I thought it was the coolest thing on earth. And I think connecting with my kids on that level, we can, like right now I can think, we're getting into spring season. Well, I kind of get geeked up for turkey hunting. And so me and my kids watch turkey hunting videos and we can enjoy that together. But kind of seeing the whole circle, I see both my kids are a lot different than I was when I was a kid. I was pretty, I was kind of hyper, and I really needed like focus of, fishing or some sort of channel to really, get me to get out somewhere. Otherwise, I was all over the place. I guess they call it ADD or whatever. My kids.
We all have it.
Yeah, both my kids are super mellow. My daughter, my son, They play a lot of sports, but what I see today too with sports is they're so heavily involved with sports, even at a really young age, that they have game after game and tournament after tournament that, it starts to cut into like what I would consider family time or fishing time. And so we really try to make time to go fishing, even if it's out on our pontoon or whatever. I try to make time to go fishing with them, hunting with them, but just kind of relate to them. And I guess, my kids, and like every kid and myself, I mean, I got a smartphone and I'm always, on my smartphone, they're on their phones, they're on the computer, the iPad. And so at least we can watch YouTube videos together, we can DVR things together, but then we can go out and do it. And what I see with kids today too is, and like my kids, the learning curve is way less than when I was a kid. Like I had to actually go out there and figure out how to fish topwater and not rip a bait out of a fish's mouth. My kids already know because they watch the YouTube video. And now, I brought my son out. We were throwing like skitter walks, on the top for largemouth bass. And my son was like a pro at it right away. And I'm like, how'd you learn how to do that? And he's like, oh, YouTube. And so, that learning curve is so much shorter. But it's cool to see them get excited about certain things. But I just try to fuel that. Like if it's springtime and there's a good crappie bite, I get them out of school. Like, hey, we're taking a day. We're going to go out and catch crappies today and just have a good experience and a fun time doing it. It's weird to think of myself as like the dad figure because I'm like a big kid,
Yeah.
But both my kids are fun. Like I was just talking about saltwater this spring. It was tough ice fishing at the end of the season with all the snow. And at the end of the season, I'm like, we're out of here. And it was spring break, so I just grabbed my daughter. I said, hey, we're going to Florida. Let's go fishing for a couple days. And, my son had other plans. He's going to, like, Wisconsin Dells or wherever. So he was so bummed. I'm like, your sister and I are going to go down to Naples tomorrow, and we're going to go catch some fish. And he's like, what?
And we're going to wear shorts and short sleeve. And
so, but I try to make time to do that. Like last year, I brought my son to Canada. We try to fish a lot, and not interfere with baseball and softball and basketball and every football season and everything they have going on. But you got to make time for it. I remember last fall we did a fishing trip and, my son was going to miss a practice or something. I told my wife, I'm like, it's one practice. He's going to be playing football for the next how many years or have X amount of practices. And sports, when I was a kid, was obviously big. I played sports. I loved playing sports with my friends. But now it's crazy how young they start, these kids, and they're really, they're in, like I can think of my daughter for softball. She plays in the school ball, and then it's summer ball, and it's fall leagues, and then she plays on these different leagues in the summer, and it really cuts into fishing time, man.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a big balance. I mean, to have a successful long career, you need that support system at home. You need to be, just be anchored, to make it work. And you see a lot of guys come and go, that just can't quite make all that balance work. And so that's a huge, huge part of this industry, certainly. So if you can make it work on any level, get a passing grade on that level, that's obviously a big, big deal. You got anything coming up that you're looking forward to this spring?
I'm going to Green Bay. I fell in love with that shallow water pitching bite. You want to talk about being able to use your electronics and have an exciting, cool bite. I mean, this is the type of bite I was talking about where it like drives the passion. Green Bay a few years ago went out there with some friends and, kind of heard about all the big walleyes out there and wanted to experience them for myself. And what I can say about Green Bay in a nutshell, it's just one of those cool gems where it's really hot right now. The bite's really hot. It's like Lake Winnipeg a few years back. That was it's still really hot up there on Lake Winnipeg, and it's great fishery, but it was new like 10 years ago to me. So I had to go up to Green Bay or Lake Winnipeg to catch all these big walleyes. Well, now Green Bay to me is like the Winnipeg. That's both fisheries have great, massive walleyes. But what's cool about Green Bay is it's shallow water fishing. These big females are coming in to spawn, and they're all, all these walleyes in there to do their thing in the spring, but it's in shallow water. And really what it equates out to is using your electronics and pitching on pods of fish. So really, I mean, it's pretty simple. If anybody's interested in going out to Green Bay, it's all about launching your boat and then finding the warmer water, finding these big pods of fish out there, and then just pitching on them. and it's super simple. I mean, we figured it out in, a couple days with a little help of some of the local guides and stuff. But really, you just drive around till you see these pods of fish, and I'm blessed to have just awesome electronics where I can see them on side scan. You touch your screen, it tells you 47 feet, that's where that pot of fish is. Throw it in neutral, pitch your bail out there with a rip and wrap, it hits the bottom, and those fish just crack it, and it's so cool. It's just one of the coolest bites. It's like hunting for walleyes. You just drive around, there's another pot of fish, pitch on them, and then bam, bam, bam. And and the fish are enormous. It's a lot of 10, 11, 12, 13 plus pound walleyes. And, now after doing it for 3 years, I'm like addicted to it. So I'm looking at, like I was saying earlier, the calendar's coming, man. April, whatever. As soon as that ice goes out, that's the time of year to be out there and doing that.
Love it. Yeah. And talking about technology, man, you've been doing that for 3 years, but 10 years ago, did we even, and where's the industry going,
Yeah, the electronics nowadays are great. I mean, it's crystal clear imaging. I can see them on my graph. I can see them on my Reliance, and it's so cool. And I do a lot of, pitching bites like that where I'll see the fish first. And I preach in seminars. I don't care if it's summer or winter. I don't start fishing until I see fish. And it holds true. I mean, it's so much more fun to drive around until you see a big pot of fish and pitch on them. Whereas back in the day, you just drift through them aimlessly or, drift around, and it was a slower process. Now you just drive around until you see them. And that's the other thing is we're not keeping any fish. That's not a harvest thing. We're just going out there to whale on them. We're putting fish back. They're spawning. They're doing their thing. And it's just a fun thing to do. I mean, I'm driving 6-7 hours out there because of the love of just catching a fish and then putting it back in the water. And it's just it's a really cool fishery. It's really exploded as one of these great walleye destinations. A couple other things I'm doing in the spring, obviously turkey hunting. I'm going to take my kids turkey hunting. Love sitting in the blind with those two and just yucking it up and hearing all the birds and all the gobbling, and it's like spring's here. And then of course spring pan fishing. Last year we had such a late ice out, I didn't really get to spring pan fish at all. And this year I'm really, that's like me time, before the whole guiding season starts and before, Minnesota fishing openers kind of the kickoff to the craziness of summer and fishing every day and taking people out fishing and everything that's going on. I get that little window there right in May where the first part of May I get to go pan fishing. So I'm really looking forward to that because those are the days where it's 70 degrees, 65 degrees, nice warm afternoon. I pick the kids up from school. We're going out crappie fishing, and same thing. It's not about harvesting a bunch of fish. It's about being in the boat with my kids and just having a good time and just whaling on schools of crappies. And I love that. I love seeing them in the shallows and moving around. And it's like right after ice out when you get those first few warm days and all the fish in the whole lake just push into those shallow water. It's like looking into an aquarium. And you're seeing largemouth bass and crappies and bluegills and everything in the lake is in that shallow water for a reason because it's warm. They're just like us. They're absorbing the sun. They're taking it all in. They're up there feeding on, bait fish, perch, whatever's up in there. And I just have fond memories of going crappie fishing after school with my dad. And I try to do the same thing with my kids, find these warm water bays and get back in there and start catching fish.
Cool, man. Well, I tell you what, Tony, absolutely fantastic having you on. Love the conversation. Love the stories. It's just a tremendous honor to meet you. Where can people find you? Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, where you at?
All of the above, Tony Roach Fishing. You can go to Roach's Guide Service. My Instagram, Facebook. I do podcasts. I shoot a lot of YouTube videos, Tony Roach Fishing YouTube channel. I'm an educator. I like to teach people how to fish. Like I said, I get crazy about a certain technique and it overwhelms me, and it's great to be able to just film it and showcase exactly what I'm doing. And I'll show everything from the line I'm using to the rod power and action to the lure, the structure I'm fishing. I really try to break it down because I'm such a visual learner, and that's how I learn certain techniques, and I try to teach that how exactly I learned that technique to someone else, and I find it incredible. I have customers that come out year after year, or multiple times a year because I've taught them all sorts of different techniques and watched how they've grown as anglers, and I love seeing that. And as someone who is passionate about fishing, I some people are great writers. I think I'm really good at describing different techniques and how I break it down in my brain. And believe me, there's times where I have sleepless nights thinking about bites where I get up in the morning and I'm like, oh yeah, I should have been on a 19 feet, or I should have worked that bait a little differently, And so I try to break that down pretty easily. And, there's certain things that absolutely consume me. And when it comes to particular bites, I don't care if it's for bass, if it's for walleyes, if it's for pike, muskies, I try to showcase it and show you exactly how I'm doing it. And, I just think it's the greatest thing because I think anglers learn from other anglers. I've learned a lot of stuff from other anglers over the years, whether watching them on TV, on YouTube, fishing with them. And I like showing other anglers exactly what I'm doing to put more fish in the boat. And so, yeah, if you follow me on any of those, you're going to get an education. I don't just throw stuff out there to gloat about a big fish. It's like, hey, this is how we caught him, man. And just letting people in on that. And, follow me on any of those channels.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. If anybody's looking to learn anything about fishing, if they're checking out your stuff, they're definitely doing the right things. And if they're not checking out your stuff, probably should think about it for sure, man. Well, thanks for coming in today. Very, very cool to meet you, and can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of the JMO Podcast. Head on down to the comment section. Let us know your thoughts, and if there's anything you'd like to hear on a future episode, we'd love to hear about it.